Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 13 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2. So at the moment we're in chapter 5. Chapter 5's titled The Cause of All Causes, and we're starting today. We're in the second section. Brahma begins his response to Narada, and we're starting from verse 14. First of all, our prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschitya Deshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha, Paditanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yes, all right, so we start today with verse 14. So let us read the translation. The 5 elementary ingredients of creation, the interaction thereof set up by eternal time, and the intuition or nature of the individual living beings are all differentiated parts and parcels of the personality of Godhead Vasudeva, and in truth, there's no other value in them. That's a pretty profound statement, isn't it? All these things which make up reality as we know it, they're all parts and parcels of the Lord. And the fact is that beyond recognizing and relating with them in that context, there's no value at all. Right, so Srila Prabhupada begins. This world is an impersonal representation of the Lord because the ingredients, their interactions, the enjoyer of the resultant actions, the living entities, they're all produced by the external and internal energies of the Lord. There's nothing else, just the external and internal energies of the Lord. And this, of course, this is confirmed fairly famously in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verses 4 and 5. Yes, that earth, water, fire, air, ether, and mind, intelligence, false ego, these things are produced from the external energy. Yes. So the jiva, the living entity who enjoys all this, Prabhupada says, is an offshoot of internal potency. That's an interesting way to put it. An offshoot. It's not as integral, as integrally a part of the internal potency as the body of the Lord, for example, or the Lord's abode. The living entities, they're spiritual by nature, but Prabhupada refers to them as an offshoot because they have this marginal tendency, tatasta shakti, marginal potency, that they can stay in either place in the internal potency situation or in the external potency situation. And, well, we, of course, we are living proofs of that. We've been living in the external potency situation for a long time. We don't even know how long, but long. And it's only after a really long time that we got the idea really like clearly and seriously, hey, let's get out of here. It's not the right place to be. And so now we're trying to get back under the permanent shelter of the internal potency. Yeah, but still, anyway, either way, the material ingredients, spiritual sparks, that's us, living entities, none of us are independent from Krishna. And all things, external, internal, marginal, they're simply displays of the effulgence of the Lord. Yes. Yeah, they're just displays as light, heat, and smoke are displays of fire. Very interesting. Okay, verse 15. The Vedic literatures are made by and are meant for the Supreme Lord. The demigods are also meant for serving the Lord as parts of his body. The different planets are also meant for the sake of the Lord. And different sacrifices are performed just to please him. Yes. So, Prabhupada begins the purport. According to Vedanta Sutra, Shastra Yonit Vat. The Supreme Lord is the author of all revealed scriptures. And all revealed scriptures are for knowing the Lord. And in any literature which is not meant for reviving our Krishna consciousness is just immediately on the spot rejected by the devotees, no matter how exciting or beautiful or whatever like that those literatures may be. And famously, it's said in the Bhagavatam that they are places of pilgrimage for crows. That's all. So anyway, the supreme deity is Narayan. Demigods are recommended secondarily for worship in relation to Narayan, because they're like his assisting hands and they're helping him in so many ways. Otherwise, if we don't see them like that and understand them like that and relate with them like that, then interaction of any sort really with demigods is, at best unauthorized, at worst a major distraction. So they're dependent on Narayan, and for us to have any relationship with them, that depends on our and their relationships with Narayan. So different planets, they're mentioned here in the verse. The verse talks about different planets. They're meant for the sake of the Lord. And Prabhupada explains they're attractive. Different planets are attractive because they offer different varieties of life and happiness, which partially represent Sat, Chit, Ananda, eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Partially. And usually, very small part too. So, some people, they want to go to Brahmaloka. and increase their duration of life and their enjoyment. And Prabhupada makes the point, if you can get to Brahmaloka, if you can manage that, then you can aspire to reach the planets in the spiritual world. Yeah. Therefore, the journey, easy journey to other planets, you remember that? It culminates in reaching the supreme planet of the Lord, reaching not just Vaikuntha, but Goloka Vrindavan. And how to do that? Good question, important question. Particularly Sankirtan Yajna. Okay, and verse 16. All different types of meditation or mysticism are means for realizing Narayan. All austerities are aimed at achieving Narayan. Culture of transcendental knowledge is for getting a glimpse of Narayan. And ultimately, salvation is entering the kingdom of Narayan. Well, that's very nice. That's very specific. You know, it reminds us of a verse in, what was it? Earlier on. And I think it was this second chapter of the first canto, where everything, same idea, Vasudeva this, Vasudeva that, everything's based on Vasudeva, who's Krishna. So 17, inspired by him only, I discover what is already created by him, Narayan, under his vision as the all-pervading super soul. And I also am created by him only. So there's a more substantial purport here. And Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, even Brahma, the creator of the universe, admits that he's not the actual creator, but is simply inspired by the Lord Narayan, and therefore creates under his, Narayan's, superintendence those things already created by him, the super soul of all living entities. So Srila Prabhupada gets into the nature of the soul and the super soul, that, which, you know, we've seen before, of course, many times. There are two souls in each body, soul and super soul. And the super soul inspires the soul. The way Prabhupada puts it is to create what is already created by the Lord. Yes. And by the goodwill of the Lord, a discoverer of something in the world is accredited as the discoverer. And Prabhupada gives the example of Columbus. America was already there. There were already people living there. And what to speak of animals and trees and grass, and, you know, it was already heavily populated. But Columbus, quote unquote, discovered it, and now he's famous. Hundreds of years later, we learn about him in school and hear about him here and there. But it's the same principle as creation. Krishna gives us the inspiration and intelligence to create something, and we do, by his mercy. Yes. The ability, Prabhupada says, the ability is given by him according to our willingness to serve him. So therefore we must be willing. This is, you know, in a sense, the essence or the first part of what it means to be a devotee, that willingness. Not just like, oh, all right then, that sort of willingness, but the willingness in the sense of inspiration, enthusiasm. Let us serve the Lord. Right. Yeah, so you must be willing, and then Krishna will empower you in proportion to your surrender. So Brahma is a great devotee already. So he's empowered or inspired by the Lord to create or engineer the universe. And another example, the Lord inspired Arjuna to fight in the Battle of Kurukshetra. So, second paragraph. Whoops. Second paragraph. Okay, oh, I see, okay. The Battle of Kurukshetra, and all wars, any battle, any place, any time, is made by the will of the Lord, because no one can do mass annihilation without the sanction of the Lord. Sure, what a way to put it, but yes. So Duryodhana and company insulted Draupadi, who's a great devotee, and she appealed to the Lord and to others, all the silent observers of this unwarranted insult. And then following that, so she appealed to the Lord, and following that, Arjuna was advised, inspired like that, by Krishna to fight and take the credit for it. Otherwise, they were going to be killed anyway by the will of the Lord. Yeah, and the idea is because of that insult, at least that was one of the very major factors why there was the Battle of Kurukshetra. Yeah. So Arjuna was advised to become the agent, take the credit, like that. Okay, and then there's the third paragraph. In Vedic writings like Katha Upanishad, it says, Sarvabhuta Antaratma, the Lord who resides in everyone's bodies and directs everything. The Lord resides in everyone's bodies and directs everything for one who is a surrendered soul. That being the crucial point. And those who are not surrendered, they're under Maya. Therefore, they do things on their own account and they suffer the consequences. What to do? So the great devotees like mentioned here, Lord Brahma, Arjuna, they don't do anything on their personal account. They always wait for indications from the Lord. And they try to do things for the Lord, which often appear wonderful to ordinary vision. So Prabhupada mentions one of the Lord's names is Urukrama, one whose actions are wonderful and beyond our imagination, or even very literally, one whose steps are very wonderful. Krama meaning step. So the devotee's actions sometimes appear wonderful due to the direction of the Lord. So everyone's intelligence, whatever that may be, depending on the individual. Some it may be good Vaishnava intelligence, others it may be just horrible Rakshasa demon intelligence. We have both on this planet. So all the different types of intelligence which different living entities have, different humans have, that is overseen by the Lord as supersoul. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the subtle presence of the Lord is felt by the intelligent man who can study the psychic effects of thinking, feeling, and willing. 18. The Supreme Lord is pure spiritual form, transcendental to all material qualities. Yet, for the sake of the creation of the material world and its maintenance and annihilation, he accepts through his external energy the material modes of nature called goodness, passion, and ignorance. Right, so the Lord, among many other things, he's the master of the external energies, the master of the modes, but he's never affected by them. But we are, the living entities, the jivas, we're affected by them. Yes, or susceptible to them. That's a way of putting it. Yeah. So in other words, the modes, being products of the Lord's material energy, they're certainly connected with him, like servants are connected to their master. So the Lord controls the material energy, and the living entities are neither masters of it nor controllers. They become controlled by it. So Prabhupada says, factually the Lord is eternally manifested by his internal potency or spiritual energy, just like the sun and its rays in the clear sky. But at times he creates the material energy as the sun creates a cloud in the clear sky. That's interesting. So, of course, this is a very good example, and the point, or one of the points, is the sun creates a cloud in the clear sky by heating the water, basically. But the sun is not affected by the cloud. You know, I'm sure you've all flown, and you know very well, it can be just down on the ground. It can be a terrible day, raining and pouring and just horrible. But you take off in the plane and you go through the clouds, and it's a beautiful sunny day. Yes, not a cloud in the sky, so to speak. Yeah. I mean, yeah, just perfect weather. So, yes, that's interesting. So, yeah. So the Lord's unaffected by the little material energy, which is manifested at times in the unlimited span of the Lord's rays of Brahma Jyoti. Okay, now verse 19. These three modes of material nature, being further manifested as matter, knowledge, and activities, put the eternally transcendental living entity under conditions of cause and effect, and make him responsible for such activities. All right. So the jivas, well, we just read about the jivas some minutes ago. They're internal potency, they're spiritual, Satchitananda, but they have the marginal tendency. Yeah. So therefore here Prabhupada says they're in between the internal and external potencies, and therefore called marginal. So, but the thing is that fundamentally they are internal potency. They're not comprised of both spiritual energy and material energy in terms of their structure, what they are. But they just have this tendency, psychological, emotional tendency, to go this way or that way, either way. Yeah. So therefore, because they are internal potency, actually, despite their marginal nature, they're not actually meant to be conditioned by the material energy, but due to this mistaken decision that they want to lord it over the material nature, then because of that, the marginal tendency really starts showing itself, and then they're involved in material life. So when that happens, their knowledge is covered by Maya. And Prabhupada says, it is so constant and it is so deep that it appears the living entity is eternally ignorant. It seems like that, although it's not exactly that. Yeah. Just like a person, you could give the example of someone who's got a habit, something they do, and they've been doing it since childhood, and they're doing it now, and they just keep doing it. And you may notice that, this is not a good habit. Let me try to help the person, convince the person, or something like that, to stop doing whatever it is. So then you try, but then you turn around and they're doing the same thing again. Because it's deep. It's very deep. So our tendency to dive into material life and want to enjoy it, it's so strong, so deep, so long-standing that you wouldn't be, what would you say, criticized or something like that if you said that it looks like we've been eternally in ignorance. So, and it applies to the scientist. They're just caught up seeing material causes. They don't understand adibhuta, adhyatma, adidaiva. They don't understand those things. Because the conditioned soul under ignorance can't see those things. Yeah. So Prabhupada says the adibhuta manifestation entails repetition of birth and death, along with old age and disease. The adhyatma manifestation conditions the spirit soul, and adidaiva manifestation is the controlling system. Yeah, okay. Adibhuta manifestation entails repetition of birth and death. Yeah, okay, so we got those. Adhyatma, conditioning for the soul. Adidaiva is the controlling system. Yeah, means the Lord or the demigods on behalf of the Lord. So these are all material manifestations of cause and effect. And there's also the sense of responsibility of the conditioned actors. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, they are, after all, manifestations of the conditioned state, and the human being's freedom from such a conditioned state is the highest possible, highest perfectional attainment. So on to verse 20. O Brahman Narada, the super seer, the transcendent Lord, is beyond the perception of the material senses of the living entities because of the above-mentioned three modes of nature but he is the controller of everyone, including me. Lord Brahma's really getting into it. So, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that the impersonalist is less intelligent than the personalist. However much the impersonalist may be engaged in studying Vedanta, doesn't really matter. They're still worse off than the personalist. In fact, in Bhagavad Gita, the materialists are described as being Alpa-medasa. Alpa means small. Medasa means intelligence. They got very small intelligence. But the impersonalists are described as being abuddhi. They have no intelligence. Yeah, so the impersonalists, however much they may study the Vedanta or talk about or think about merging, they're still covered by the modes. So they can't approach the Lord. Because Krishna says he's always, for those people who are envious and just not devotees, he reserves the right to be covered by the curtain of Yoga Maya. But we mustn't think that previously he was unmanifested, but now he's taken the human form. And after a while, he'll go back to the unmanifested state. That's what the impersonalists think, that Brahman takes a form like our bodies temporarily. And after a while, when these bodies are gone, then we'll just be Brahman again. So this idea of formlessness of the Lord, Prabhupada says, is due to the Yoga Maya curtain. And it can only be removed by the will of the Lord, as we were reading just a few minutes ago, that all inspirations come from the Lord. So any type of misconception can only be removed by the will of the Lord. For the materialists, meaning in terms of their karma. So yeah, but this idea of formlessness, the Yoga Maya curtain, can only be removed when the conditioned souls surrender to the Lord. And otherwise, the transcendental devotees, they can see all the blissful forms of the Lord with their vision of love in pure devotional service. Okay. So now, devotees, we go on to the next section, which is from verse 21 to verse 34. And it's Lord Brahma describing the process of creation. So let's have a look through and see. So, okay, 21 to 34. Let's read the verses. 21. The Lord, who's the controller of all energies, thus creates by his own potency eternal time, the fate of all living entities, and their particular nature. So these things he creates with his own potency, eternal time, the fate, our karma, and our natures, for which they were created, and he again merges them independently. All right, 22. After the incarnation of the first Purusha, Karanadakshay Vishnu, the Mahatattva, or the principles of material nature, take place. And then time is manifested. And in course of time, the three qualities appear. Nature means the three qualitative appearances. They transform into activities. So, okay, verse 23. Material activities are caused by the Mahatattvas being agitated. At first there's transformation of the modes of goodness and passion, and later, due to the mode of ignorance, there's matter, its knowledge, and different activities of material knowledge, they come into play. Verse 24. The self-centered materialistic ego, thus being transformed into three features, becomes known as the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance in three divisions, namely the powers that evolve matter, knowledge of material creations, and the intelligence that guides such materialistic activities. Narada, you are quite competent to understand this. It's, fairly intense. 25. From the darkness of false ego, the first of the five elements, namely the sky, is generated. Its subtle form is the quality of sound, exactly as the seer in relation with the seen. Verse 26 to verse 29, altogether 4 verses. Because the sky is transformed, air is generated with the quality of touch, and by previous succession, the air is also full of sound. Which was the first. So by succession, along with touch, air, sound is there. And the basic principles of duration of life, which are sense perception, mental power, and bodily strength. When the air is transformed in course of time and nature's course, fire is generated, taking shape with the sense of touch and sound. Since fire is also transformed, there's a manifestation of water, full of juice and taste. As previously, it also has form and touch, and is also full of sound. And water, being transformed from all variegatedness on earth, appears odorous, and as previously, becomes qualitatively full of juice, touch, sound, and form, respectively. That's the process of creation. From the mode of goodness, the mind is generated and becomes manifest, as also the 10 demigods controlling the bodily movements. Such demigods are known as the controller of all directions, the controller of air, the sun god, the father of Daksha Prajapati, the Ashvini Kumars, the fire god, the king of heaven, the worshipable deity in heaven, the chief of the Adityas, and Brahmaji, the Prajapati, all come into existence. Whew. Interesting, including the mind. Sometimes devotees, understanding what the mind's like, they wonder, how could it come from the mode of goodness? And it's not an unfair question. 31. By further transformation of the mode of passion, the sense organs, like the ear, skin, nose, eyes, tongue, mouth, hands, genitals, legs, and the outlet for evacuating, together with intelligence and living energy, are all generated. 32. O Narada, best of the transcendentalists, the forms of the body cannot take place as long as these created parts, namely the elements, senses, mind, and modes of nature, are not assembled. 33. Thus, when all these became assembled by force of the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this universe certainly came into being by accepting both the primary and secondary causes of creation. Verse 34, which is the last verse in this section. Thus all the universes remained thousands of eons within the water, the causal ocean, and the Lord of living beings entering into each of them caused them to be fully animated. Wow. It's intense, but if we think about it carefully, we'll see that, right, it's good. Okay, so let's go through things in more depth. From verse 21 to verse 34, Lord Brahma describes the process of creation. 21, the Lord, who's the controller of all energies, thus creates by his own potency, eternal time, the fate of all living entities, and their particular nature, for which they were created, and he again merges them independently. So here's an interesting little point. We've taken out an extract from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's, first of all, his translation of this verse and then his purport. This is from the translation. The Lord of Maya, desiring to become many, by his own will accepts time, which was merged in himself, as well as karma and swabhava, which were merged in the jiva. Karma and swabhava were merged in the jiva through the agency of Maya. So in his purport he says, the Lord, desiring to become many, by his own will accepts for creation time, which was merged in him, karma, the fate of the jivas, and swabhavam, which were merged in the jiva. It's intense. So anyway, Srila Prabhupada begins his purport by saying, the creation of the material world, wherein the conditioned souls are allowed to act subordinately by the Supreme Lord, takes place again and again after being repeatedly annihilated. Okay, yeah. So that's material life, again and again. Yeah, creation, maintenance, distraction, creation, maintenance, distraction. And the conditioned souls are allowed, they're given the opportunity to take up a position of subordinate to the Lord, of being subordinate to the Lord. And Prabhupada talks of the material world as being like a cloud in the spiritual sky. The Mahatattva cloud covers a portion of the spiritual sky. It's for the conditioned souls who want to lord it over Maya. Anyway, we talked about that just already today. So like seasons come and go, Prabhupada refers to the rainy season like the seasons just come and go. The creation comes and goes regularly. And it allows the conditioned souls to play and create their own fates. Yeah, it's a playground for the conditioned souls. So the process of creation and annihilation is beginningless, anadi. And we know that the duration of even a partial creation, just one day of Brahma, 8,640,000,000 of our years, it's completely inconceivable. I don't know if any of you have ever, it's not exactly a game, but it's kind of related to, what's his name, Rubik or rubric?
Rubik's Cube.
Rubik's Cube. You got to keep turning and turning and turning. And in the end, after however long, you may get them all the same color. And what do you get for that? Nothing. So also, as a child, I once did. I got what's called, it's a part of a car called the odometer. And it's the part which, you see on when you're driving, it shows how many miles. They're tenths of a mile or kilometers. Let's just say kilometers. Tenths of a kilometer, then kilometers, then 10 kilometers, then 100 kilometers, then 1,000, then 10,000, and maybe 100,000. So, I don't know if you ever tried turning one of those to get it all zero. To do the first one, the tenths, is so easy. To do the next one is more difficult because it's 10 tenths. Yeah, well, it's 10 circles of tenths. Yeah. So if you look at this, 8,640,000,000 years, where are we? Well, at the moment, we're in the first 2 zeros. And it's pretty unlikely we'll get to the third set. You follow the idea? Yeah. We'll be able to use them in terms of demarking our lives. But to get to the third set of numbers, how many live to 100? And here we're talking about 8,640,000,000. Yeah. And that's just a partial creation. So both the material and spiritual creations rest on his impersonal form, but he keeps a distance in his personal feature as Purnam, as the complete. So we shouldn't think that his personal feature doesn't exist because the impersonal, we shouldn't think that his personal feature doesn't exist because of how extensive the impersonal features are. Yeah. That the material and spiritual creations rest on them. So there's an example given of how creation rests on his energy in Bhagavad Gita. Let's just see if we can manage this. It's not so easy, but let's have a look. So it's said that although the air and the atoms rest within the huge expansion of the sky, which is like the resting reservoir of everything that is materially created, that although that, still the sky remains separate and unaffected. Yeah. Because the sky, or space, is just space within which things happen. But when the things happen, within the space, they don't affect the space because it's just space. Yeah, it's not. As soon as you say, well, it affects the air within the space, but then it's not the space, it's the air. The space is something else. So similarly, although the Lord maintains everything created by his energy, he always remains separate. And this is accepted, Prabhupada says, even by Shankaracharya, believe it or not. He says, Narayana Paro Vyaktat. Narayana exists separately, apart from the impersonal creative energy. So the whole creation thus merges within the body of transcendental Narayan at the time of annihilation, and the creation emanates from his body again with the same unchanging categories of fate and individual nature. Everything gets wound up into him in due course, transcendental Narayan referring to Karanadaksha Vishnu, actually. And then when it comes out again, it's the same. It's just the same. It's not a different thing. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the individual living entities, being parts and parcels of the Lord, are sometimes described as Atma, or qualitatively, because in the verse, the term Atma is used for the Lord. Qualitatively one in spiritual constitution, one with the Lord. But because such living entities are apt to be attracted to the material creation, actively and subjectively, they are therefore different from the Lord. That's intense. 22. After the incarnation of the first Purusha, Karanadaksha Vishnu, the Mahatattva, or the principles of material creation, take place. And then time is manifested, and in course of time, the three qualities appear. Nature means the three qualitative appearances. They transform into activities. So Jiva Goswami makes the point, time is the first cause. Okay. So Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, by the omnipotency of the Supreme Lord, the whole material creation evolves by the process of transformation and reactions one after another, and by the same omnipotency, they are wound up again one after another and conserved in the body of the Supreme. So Prabhupada makes the point that kala, or time, is a synonym of nature and is the transformed manifestation of the principles of material creation. That's intense. Let me just read it again. Kala, or time, is the synonym of nature and is the transformed manifestation of the principles of material creation. So therefore, in that sense, Prabhupada says, therefore, as such, kala, or time, may be taken as the first cause of all creation. Get it? Anyway, read it again if you need to. Because the verse spoke of time coming after certain things. Jiva Goswami said, time is the first cause, we read that. But now Prabhupada has explained it. Yeah. So kala, or time, is the synonym of nature and is the transformed manifestation of the principles of material creation. Therefore, it's the first cause. And by transformation of nature, different activities become visible. nature meaning what? The three modes. By transformations of the modes, activity starts. Yeah. Okay. So Prabhupada says these activities may be taken up as the natural instinct of each and every living being, or even of the inert objects, and after the manifestation of activities, there are varieties of products and byproducts of the same nature. But originally, they're all due to the Lord, based on the Lord, because of the Lord. Yes. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the Vedanta Sutras and the Bhagavatam thus begin with the absolute truth as the beginning of all creations. Janmadyasya yataha. Ayat 23. Material activities are caused by the Mahatattvas being agitated. At first there's transformation of the modes of goodness and passion, and later, due to the mode of ignorance, matter, its knowledge, and different activities of material knowledge come into play. So Prabhupada makes the point that material creations of every description are more or less due to the development of the mode of passion. Yeah. So Mahatattva is the principle of material creation. And when by the will of the Lord, or according to Brahma Samhita, by the glance of the Lord, first of all, it becomes agitated, then the modes come out. And then when the modes have come out, the mode of passion sort of takes over. Yeah, from the outset. Yes. So all the deities of the modes are listed, we know them. Brahma, passion; Vishnu, goodness; Shiva, ignorance. But we should understand, keep the perspective that the material nature is the mother. And the mode of ignorance is represented by Shiva, who's the father of material activities. Not the father of all activities, but material activities, because materialistic activities mean ignorance. They're rooted in ignorance. Right, so in Kali Yuga, materialism really gets hold, and living entities become particularly forgetful of their spiritual natures more and more. Yeah, because passion is so predominant, and ignorance. Little bit of goodness, as soon as there's, or when there is some goodness, Prabhupada says, by a slight cultivation of the mode of goodness, a glimpse of spiritual nature is perceived. But due to the prominence of the other modes, particularly passion, then the goodness becomes adulterated. Yes. And therefore, when you're a conditioned soul, you can't transcend the limits of the modes. And realization of the Lord becomes very difficult, even though you may be predominantly in goodness. In other words, gross matter is adibhuta, maintaining it is adidaiva, and the initiator of material activities is called adhyatma. Yeah, well, adibhuta in this context, or in a certain context, I mean, a very commonly used context, adibhuta is the body, Adhyatma is the soul, and Adhidaiva is, well, the demigods or the super soul. Right. So the body is gross matter. The super soul, the demigods, they're supplying things for maintenance. And the materialistic activities are coming from the conditioned soul. So Prabhupada says, in the material world, these three principles act as prominent features, namely its raw material, its regular supplies, and its use in different varieties of material creations for sense enjoyment by the bewildered entities. Wow, it's intense, I must say. I don't know how it is for you, but for me, it's intense. And here comes verse 24, which is intense. The self-centered material ego, thus being transformed into three features, goodness, passion, and ignorance, becomes known as the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance in three divisions, namely the powers that evolve matter, knowledge of material creations, and the intelligence that guides such materialistic activities. Narada, you are quite competent to understand this. I hope we are too. At least, on a sort of basic level. So anyway, Prabhupada says materialistic ego, identifying with matter, is very self-centered, devoid of knowledge of God. And this is the cause of the conditioned souls being conditioned and continuing to be conditioned. And it's all described very nicely, Prabhupada says, in Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter, 24 to 27, which we won't read out, but but we've got them all here. You can have a look at them. Unintelligent people think that Krishna was impersonal before and has assumed this personality, but they don't actually know his higher nature. He's never manifest to these foolish people. For them, he's always covered by Maya. Therefore, they don't know him as unborn and infallible, and so many other things they don't know. So therefore, Krishna goes on to say, I know everything from the past, what's happening now, what's going to happen in the future, and I also know all living entities, but I am unknown to them. So at that, verse 27, O Arjuna, all living beings are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. It's intense. It's definitely intense. So the impersonalists say that the Lord was just impersonal, Brahman, takes a material form for a while, and when the form sort of runs out of steam and dies, then he's back in his usual impersonal state. Yeah. So this misconception is very widespread due to ignorance, tamagun. They can't conceive of the Lord's eternal spiritual form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And how is that? What do you think? Because he reserves the right to not be exposed to non-devotees who are so obstinate that even they read Bhagavad Gita, they still don't accept that the Absolute is a person. So Prabhupada made the comment, you're probably aware that before he came to the West, there were, I don't know how many, but there was some number of translations and commentaries on Bhagavad Gita in English. But Prabhupada made the point that not one of them had produced one devotee of Krishna. It's extremely significant, actually. So, yeah. So even after reading Bhagavad Gita, they don't accept the message, the basic message. And so it's due to Yoga Maya. The energy of the Lord covers the vision of the obstinate impersonalist. So therefore these people are described as mudhas. And Prabhupada makes the point, if the Lord takes a form or material shape from his original impersonal feature, if that's the case, then it means that he is born and changeable from impersonal to personal, but he is not changeable. That point is also made in Bhagavad Gita, that he's not changeable, and nor does he ever take a new birth like a conditioned soul. But the impersonalists, trust them. They think the Lord is one of us because of their self-centered egoism, even after studying the Vedanta. So therefore, ultimately, by the will of the Lord, the impersonalists, even though they may know Brahman, they may know Paramatma, but they're ignorant of his ultimate personal feature as Bhagavan, or in terms of how it's put here, as Narayan. Okay, oops. There's a second paragraph here. So let's go through it and then see how we are doing. So the reason for all this Maya, ignorance, passion, bewilderment is artificially increasing material demands. That's the cause of this gross ignorance. So to realize the Lord, you have to purify your senses by devotional service. And for that purpose, the mode of goodness helps. And thus, the Jnana Shakti stage of the conditioned soul is better than the Dravya Shakti and Kriya Shakti stage. That's interesting. Okay. Material civilization is manifested by a huge accumulation of raw materials for industry. Just an example I was just looking at this morning, just very briefly. Plastic. It's an accumulation of matter. There's so much plastic around. And, I haven't really got into it, but in some of the oceans, apparently, there's so much plastic. Just filling up parts of some oceans. And it is degradable or biodegradable. Yeah. And when they first invented plastic, they thought, wow, we've done a good thing, it's so useful. But what they've created. Okay, so the Lord is not changeable, and he never takes a new birth like the conditioned souls. But the impersonalists, they still think he's just one of us because of their self-centered egoism, even after studying Bhagavad Gita, even after studying Vedanta. So anyway, to realize the Lord being so engaged in material demands, you have to purify your senses by devotional service. The mode of goodness, well, we already said that. helps. Yeah. Industrial enterprises, that's Kriya Shakti, due to ignorance of spiritual life. So in order to rectify this anomaly of materialistic civilization based on Dravya Shakti and Kriya Shakti, you have to do devotional service. First of all, Prabhupada says, by adopting the principles of Karma Yoga, as per Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 27, Yat karoshi yadashnasi yat jahoshi tadasi yat, yat tapasyasa konteya tat kurushvamad arpanam. O son of Kunti, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities you may perform, should be done as an offering unto me. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.